In the cold halls of the Velron fortress, light from 100 burning crystals danced on the walls. The air smelled of rich alien spices and deep laughter echoed between the stone pillars. It was the night of the great feast, the night when Baron Valcor, ruler of the southern stars, would mock the humans again. The Velron were tall, proud, and cruel. They wore armor that shimmered like silver skin and spoke with voices that rumbled like thunder. To them, humans were nothing. Weak creatures good only for serving food and cleaning the floors. At the center of the hall sat Baron Valcor on his black stone throne. His golden eyes shone with arrogance. He raised his glass of blue fire wine and said, "Tonight, we celebrate the strength of our kind and the weakness of theirs." He pointed toward the humans who stood at the edge of the hall, heads bowed, silent and still. Among them was a young human man named Elior. His hands were rough from labor, his eyes tired but sharp. He was smarter than most thought, but he had learned long ago to hide it. One wrong look at a Velron could mean death. Then the Baron's laughter rolled through the room. "I have a gift for the humans tonight," he said. A sign of my generosity. A pair of guards entered, leading a young Velron woman. She wore a silver dress and a thin chain around her wrist. Her eyes were soft, like a storm about to break. She was Lyra, the Baron's daughter. The hall went silent. "Father?" one of the guests whispered. "Surely you do not mean—" Valcor raised a hand. "This one has no voice," he said with a sneer. "A mute daughter is no daughter of mine. Let the humans have her. Perhaps the dirt of their kind will make her speak." The room exploded with cruel laughter. Elior froze. He couldn't believe what he had heard. Guards shoved Lyra toward him. She stumbled and fell at his feet. Her silver hair spilled across the floor like liquid light. Elior wanted to help her, but he hesitated. No human touched a Velron noble. The Baron's sharp voice echoed again. "Take her, slave. She is yours now. A gift from your betters." Elior bowed his head. "As you command, my lord," he said softly. Inside, anger burned. He could see Lyra trembling. She was not cruel like her father. Her eyes were full of fear, not hatred. As the feast continued, the Velron sang, drank, and mocked. But Elior kept silent, helping Lyra to her feet. He led her out of the great hall and down the long corridor to the servant quarters. When they reached the small chamber prepared for them, Lyra stepped inside without a word. The door shut behind them with a heavy clang. The room was cold and simple, one bed, one lamp, and a single window showing the dark alien sky. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. Elior knelt before her. "You don't have to be afraid," he said quietly. "I will not hurt you." She looked at him with wide eyes. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she pointed to her throat and shook her head. He nodded. "You cannot speak," he said softly. "I understand." She lowered her gaze, sadness filling her face. Elior noticed a faint mark glowing on her wrist, a strange symbol that pulsed like a heartbeat. It looked almost human in shape. "What is that?" he asked. She quickly hid it under her sleeve. A chill passed through the room. The lamp flickered. Somewhere deep in the walls, a low hum began to rise, like a voice buried under stone. Lyra gasped, clutching her wrist. The mark was glowing brighter now. Elior stepped closer, feeling a strange pull like invisible energy connecting them. Then suddenly the light vanished. The room went still again. Lyra's breathing slowed and she looked terrified. Elior whispered, "It's all right. I won't tell anyone." She nodded weakly. Her eyes softened a little, as if she believed him. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the distant sounds of laughter from the hall. Outside, a storm rolled across the alien sky. Lightning flashed against the fortress walls. Elior looked through the window and said quietly, "One day all this will change." Lyra tilted her head, watching him. Something in her eyes glimmered, not fear this time, but hope. Then just as the thunder struck, a whisper filled the room, soft, cold, and not from either of them. "The bond has awakened." Elior turned sharply. "Who said that?" Lyra's eyes widened. She touched her wrist again, trembling. The whisper came once more, louder this time, echoing in both their minds. "She will speak, and the stars will listen." The lamp went out. The story of the human and the mute daughter had just begun. The night after the feast was silent, except for the distant thunder rolling across the alien sky. The fortress slept, but Elior could not. He sat beside the small lamp, watching the flickering light dance over the cold stone walls. Beside him, Lyra slept restlessly. Since the strange whisper last night, he hadn't stopped thinking about it. The bond has awakened. Those words haunted his mind. Who or what had spoken them? Elior studied Lyra. She looked fragile, almost human in her sleep. Her silver hair shimmered even in the dim light, and the faint mark on her wrist pulsed softly like a living thing. When she stirred, Elior gently whispered, "It's all right. You're safe here." Lyra opened her eyes slowly, blinking as if waking from a deep dream. She sat up, her gaze scanning the small room, then rested on him. He smiled carefully. "Do you remember last night?" She frowned, then nodded. She lifted her hand and pointed to her wrist, showing him the mark again. It glowed faintly, reacting to his presence. "I saw it," he said. "It lit up when I touched you." "What is it?" Lyra shook her head. She picked up a piece of broken tile from the floor and began to draw on the dusty wall. Her movements were slow and deliberate. Elior leaned closer. She drew a circle with lines spreading from it like rays, a symbol of the sun or maybe a star. Then she drew two figures, one tall, one small, standing under the same light. "You and me?" Elior asked. She nodded. Then she wrote one simple symbol next to the drawing, a Velron word he had seen before in the palace archives. He frowned. "That word means bond." Lyra's eyes met his. She tapped the mark on her wrist again, then pointed at his chest, right where his heart was. For a moment he felt a soft pulse inside, like something alive moving through his veins. The same strange energy from last night stirred again. Before he could speak, a loud metallic sound echoed outside, the sound of heavy boots. Lyra's eyes widened in fear. Elior quickly motioned for her to stay silent. He pressed his ear to the door. Two Velron guards were talking outside. "Baron wants them checked." Strange energy readings came from this room. Elior's heart pounded. "They're coming," he whispered. Lyra looked terrified. He grabbed her hand and pointed to the small vent behind the bed. "This way," he mouthed. She hesitated, but he pulled the cover off and helped her crawl through the narrow tunnel. The guards unlocked the door and stormed in. The room was empty. Only the lamp remained, flickering weakly. "Where are they?" one guard hissed. "They couldn't have gone far," said the other. "Baron said she's cursed." Maybe the curse took them both. They left quickly and the door slammed shut again. Inside the tunnel, Elior and Lyra crawled through the dark, their breathing echoing in the narrow space. The air smelled of dust and rust. Finally, they reached an opening that led into an old maintenance chamber. Elior helped Lyra out and shut the grate behind them. She looked shaken but grateful. Her eyes glimmered in the dim blue glow from the pipes. "We can't stay here," Elior said. "They'll search every room by morning." Lyra tilted her head, then took his hand, a small brave gesture that surprised him. Her hand was cold but steady. They moved through the hidden tunnels beneath the fortress. The deeper they went, the older everything became. Ancient walls, forgotten machines, and strange carvings glowing faintly in the dark. Elior stopped before one of the carvings. It was the same symbol Lyra had drawn earlier, a circle with rays. Below it, old Velron runes glowed faintly. He traced them with his fingers. "They talk about the voice of stars," he murmured, "a power that once joined the Velron and humans." Lyra stepped closer and placed her palm on the carving. Instantly, light spread through the wall. The runes flared bright blue, humming like a living heart. Elior stumbled back, shielding his eyes. The air vibrated around them. When the light faded, Lyra's hand was still on the stone. She turned slowly toward him, and for a brief moment he saw her lips move. He froze. "Lyra?" Her mouth formed a single word, barely a breath. "Elior." His eyes widened. You spoke." Lyra looked shocked, too. She touched her throat, tears filling her eyes. She tried again, and this time the sound came out clearer, trembling but real. "Elior," she whispered, her voice breaking the silence of the tunnels. He stared in disbelief. The mute princess had spoken. But before he could say anything, alarms blared above. The fortress shook and red light flooded the corridors. Lyra's mark was glowing like fire. The carvings around them lit up in the same pattern. Elior grabbed her hand. "We have to run." They sprinted down the old tunnels as the whisper returned. Louder, echoing in both their minds. "The voice has returned." Behind them, the walls cracked, spilling blue light into the darkness. Lyra clutched his hand tighter. and for the first time in her life, she spoke clearly, her voice full of fear and wonder. "Elior, what's happening to me?" He looked at her, breathless and awed. "I don't know," he said, "but I think the galaxy just woke up." The fortress above was in chaos. Red lights flashed across the black walls. Soldiers shouted in alien tongues, weapons charged, and scanners searched for traces of forbidden energy. But deep below, in the old tunnels of stone and metal, Elior and Lyra hid among the shadows. The air was thick with dust and glowing mist from cracked energy pipes. Every sound echoed like a secret trying to escape. Elior pressed his ear to the tunnel wall. "They're searching every floor," he whispered. "Your father must know something happened." Lyra sat beside him, her silver hair glowing faintly in the dark. Her eyes were still wide with disbelief. She touched her throat again as if to check if it was real, if she had truly spoken. Elior turned toward her. "Say it again," he said softly. She shook her head, afraid. Her fingers trembled as she pointed at her throat, then at him. "It's all right," Elior said. "You already did the impossible once." She took a deep breath, her lips moving slowly. The sound came weak at first in a broken whisper. "Elior," he froze. The sound was soft, but it was real. Her voice fragile and beautiful. Lyra gasped, tears filling her eyes. She covered her mouth in shock, then smiled through her trembling fingers. It was the first time he had ever seen her smile. Elior smiled too, though his heart was racing. "You spoke," he said, awe in his voice. "You really spoke." Lyra nodded slowly, her voice barely a breath. "I don't know. How?" Elior looked around the glowing carvings on the walls. "That power in your wrist, and it woke something inside you." Lyra looked down at the glowing mark. "It feels alive," she whispered, then the ground rumbled. Distant explosions shook the tunnels. Elior grabbed her arm. "We can't stay here." They moved quickly through the narrow passages until they reached a small chamber filled with strange symbols. Broken Velron machines stood like sleeping giants, their glass eyes dim. Elior found an old control panel half buried in dust. He brushed it clean, reading the words carved into the metal. "Voice conduit. Star channel. This place is ancient." Lyra ran her fingers over the strange letters and the panel came to life. Lights flickered on and the air hummed with energy. Elior stepped back. "You did that?" Lyra looked frightened but curious. "It listens," she said softly. "When I speak, it listens." He stared at her. "You mean the machines?" She shook her head slowly. "Everything." Before Elior could respond, a loud clang echoed from the passage behind them. Heavy footsteps. Lyra's eyes widened in fear. Elior whispered, "Guards." He grabbed a broken metal rod and motioned for her to hide behind the large machine. The footsteps grew louder, in more than one. The glow of alien scanners spilled into the chamber. "Search this area," a rough Velron voice commanded. "Baron Valcor said his daughter and the human were seen heading this way." Elior held his breath as shadows moved closer. Lyra crouched behind the machine, clutching her glowing wrist. Her heart pounded. The air around her shimmered slightly, the same strange energy that had awakened her voice. The guard stepped into the room. One pointed his scanner at the wall. "I'm reading strong resonance. The old machines are active again. Deactivate them." "The Baron doesn't want another accident," Elior tensed. "If they touch the panel, they might trigger something dangerous." Then Lyra's mark flared brightly, lighting the chamber. "What?" one guard shouted. Lyra stood up suddenly, eyes glowing with silver light. Her voice broke through the air, louder this time, filled with strange harmony. "Stop!" she cried. The sound was not just a word, and it was power. The guards froze in place, their armor sparking with blue light. Their weapons dropped from their hands, and the air trembled like a storm had just passed through the room. Elior stared, stunned. Lyra's voice echoed off the walls long after she stopped speaking. The guards collapsed, unconscious but alive. The room went silent again. Lyra fell to her knees, breathing hard. "I didn't mean to hurt them." Elior ran to her and held her shoulders. "You didn't, you stopped them." She looked up at him, eyes wide with fear. "What am I?" Elior shook his head. "Something your people tried to forget." He helped her stand, and they stepped over the fallen guards. The panel behind them still glowed, showing ancient Velron writing. Elior squinted to read it. "The voice shall return through the bond of two worlds," he whispered. "That's what it says." Lyra touched the words. "Voice of stars?" Elior nodded. Maybe that's you. She looked away, uncertain. My father will come. He'll kill you. Elior smiled faintly. Then I'll have to make sure he doesn't. She looked at him again, really looked at him. A human covered in dirt, tired and yet fearless. No one had ever looked at her that way before. Outside, the alarm still screamed. The Baron's soldiers were closing in. Elior grabbed her hand. We're getting out of here. There has to be an exit that leads to the wild zone. Lyra squeezed his hand back, a spark of trust between them. As they ran through the tunnels, the carvings on the walls began to glow brighter with each step as if following her. Above, Baron Valcor watched the readings on his command screen. His golden eyes narrowed. Impossible, he growled. She spoke. He turned to his soldiers. Find them both. Bring me my daughter, and the human who made her voice wake. Lightning flashed across the alien sky. Deep below, Lyra whispered to herself, I spoke. And now everything is changing. And somewhere in the dark tunnels, something ancient stirred. Listening. The tunnels trembled under their feet as Elior and Lyra ran. Red warning lights pulsed across the narrow walls, and the low hum of energy buzzed in the air like a living heartbeat. Every step echoed, mixing with the faraway shouts of alien soldiers. Lyra's hand clutched Elior's tightly. Her pulse beat fast, but her voice, that new fragile voice, whispered his name with steady courage. Elior, they're coming. I know, he said, breathless. We have to reach the surface before they seal the exits. Behind them, the sound of heavy boots and metallic weapons grew closer. The air filled with the scent of burning plasma. They turned sharply down a narrow corridor that split into two paths. The left glowed with faint blue light. The right disappeared into pure darkness. Elior hesitated for a moment. Lyra looked at him. The dark path, she whispered. I can feel something there. He didn't ask how. He just nodded. Then that's where we go. They entered the black tunnel. The air grew colder. Strange whispers moved around them, voices too soft to understand, as if the stones themselves remembered the past. Lyra's wrist mark glowed brighter, guiding their way. Each step seemed to awaken the tunnel. Symbols on the walls flickered alive, showing faded images of two species, humans and Velron, standing side by side, hands joined under a shining star. Elior stopped for a moment, staring. This place, it's older than the fortress, maybe older than the Empire. Lyra touched one of the glowing figures. They were together once, she said softly. Like us. Before he could reply, a sudden blast of plasma struck the wall behind them. The tunnel shook, stones falling from above. Run! Elior shouted. They sprinted through the collapsing passage as blue fire exploded around them. The end of the tunnel opened into a massive stone door covered in ancient carvings, the same circle and raise symbol they had seen before. Lyra stepped forward. It's the same mark, she whispered. Elior examined the door. There was no handle, no lock, only a strange groove shaped like a human hand. He looked at her, then pressed his palm against it. The entire door came alive. A deep vibration ran through the ground, and the carvings began to glow, not just blue now, but gold. The symbols pulsed in rhythm with Lyra's wrist mark. With a low grinding sound, the massive door split open. Blinding light spilled out and a rush of fresh air hit them. They stepped through, and the world changed. The tunnel opened into a wide valley under a sky of swirling violet clouds. Towering crystal pillars rose from the ground like frozen lightning. Strange alien plants shimmered in colors that shifted when they moved. It was silent, too silent. Lyra looked around in awe. The wild zone, she said softly. No one from my people comes here. They say it's cursed. Elior smiled faintly. Maybe cursed for them, maybe not for us. They walked carefully through the strange valley. The air was heavy with glowing mist and strange lights moved far in the distance like wandering spirits. After a while, Lyra stopped beside a pool of liquid silver. She knelt, staring at her reflection. I don't feel cursed anymore, she whispered. When I spoke, I felt alive. Elior crouched beside her. Your voice saved us, he said. You shouldn't fear it. Lyra looked at him, her eyes soft. You were never afraid of me, she said. He smiled. Why would I be? You're the first Velron who's ever seen me as more than dirt. For a moment, silence hung between them, not empty but full of meaning. Then the ground trembled. A shadow moved across the valley. From the mist emerged a giant machine, half buried, half alive, an ancient war sentinel of the Velron, long forgotten. Its one red eye flickered weakly as if waking from a 1,000-year sleep. Lyra stepped back, terrified. "What is that?" Elior stared at it, his mind racing. An old guardian, maybe built to protect this place. The machine's voice boomed like thunder. "Identify." "Voice of stars," Lyra gasped. Her wrist mark glowed brighter, answering the machine's call. "Voice detected," the machine said. "Awaiting command." Elior turned to her. "Lyra, it's listening to you. Try speaking to it." She hesitated. "I don't know what to say." "Say what you feel," he said gently. Lyra took a breath and stepped forward. Her voice trembled but carried power. "We mean no harm." The machine's red eye blinked once, twice, and then dimmed to blue. The ground stopped shaking. "Command accepted," it said. "The bond has returned." The silence that followed was deeper than before. Even the wind seemed to pause. Elior exhaled slowly. "You did it again." Lyra looked at him, half afraid, half amazed. "I spoke. And it listened," he nodded. "It always will. Whatever this bond is, it's not a curse. It's a key." She looked up at the glowing sky. "Then we'll find what it unlocks." But far above, on his hovering warship, Baron Valcor watched the valley through his screen. His golden eyes narrowed with rage and fear. "Activate pursuit," he ordered. They entered the wild zone. "I want them both alive." Lightning flashed, splitting the clouds. Down below, Lyra and Elior walked deeper into the shining valley, unaware that the greatest hunt in the galaxy had just begun. The morning light in the wild zone looked unreal. Soft, golden and alive, as if the sky itself was breathing. Strange creatures moved between the glowing trees, silent and curious, their eyes reflecting starlight. Elior and Lyra walked through the silver grass, their footsteps leaving faint trails of light behind them. They had traveled all night, following the path the ancient guardian had revealed. "Where is it leading us?" Elior asked quietly. Lyra glanced at the holographic map glowing from her wrist mark. It said, "To the heart of the bond." Elior frowned. "The bond? Between what?" She hesitated, looking up at the sky. "Between two worlds," she whispered. They continued forward until the mist cleared. And there, half buried in the mountains, stood a massive temple made of black stone and glowing lines of blue energy. Its shape was both alien and human, smooth curves mixed with sharp edges as if two hands from different species had built it together. Lyra stopped, her breath catching in awe. "This place, it feels like it's calling me." Elior nodded slowly. "Or both of us." They climbed the long, cracked stairs leading to the entrance. Strange carvings covered the walls. Figures of humans and Velron standing side by side, their hands raised toward the same star. At the center of it all was a single phrase written in both languages. "The voice unites what pride divided." Lyra traced the letters with her fingertips. "My people erased these words," she said softly. "They feared what they couldn't control." Elior looked at her. "Maybe that's why your father calls you cursed." She nodded slowly. "Because I remind him of the truth." They entered the temple. Inside, the air was cool and still. Blue light ran like rivers through the walls. At the center of the vast hall stood a circular platform surrounded by floating crystal pillars. When they stepped closer, the crystals came alive, projecting holograms into the air. Images spun around them, ancient Velron and humans together building cities of light. Lyra gasped as the hologram spoke in a deep, echoing voice. "Long ago, the voice gene joined the two races," the voice said. "It gave words the power to heal, to build, and to destroy. Together they sang to the stars, and the stars answered. The holograms shifted to show a great war. Velron ships burned across the sky, and human colonies were destroyed. But pride divided them," the voice continued. The voice was silenced. The bond was lost. Lyra stepped forward, eyes wide. "I'm part of that. And so are you." Elior's heart pounded. "You think that's what the mark means?" She nodded. "The voice can only awaken when both sides stand together again." Before Elior could respond, the ground rumbled. The blue light flickered red. A warning alarm echoed through the temple. Lyra's eyes widened. "They found us." Outside, thunder roared. A fleet of Velron ships appeared in the sky, led by Baron Valcor's flagship, its engines glowing with deadly light. Inside, Elior ran to the control panel at the center of the platform. There has to be something here we can use. Lyra joined him, her hands trembling as she touched the glowing symbols. The temple responded to her touch. The crystals pulsed brighter. Then a new hologram appeared before them, a tall Velron figure with ancient robes and kind eyes. His voice was calm and sorrowful. "You who bear the voice," he said, "must choose. Speak to awaken the power that once united the stars, or stay silent and let the old hatred rule forever." Lyra turned to Elior, her voice shaking. "If I speak, it could kill us both." Elior looked at her, steady and calm. "Then let's die speaking the truth." She closed her eyes. The mark on her wrist burned with light. Her voice rose, soft at first, then strong. Words in the old language filled the air, echoing through the temple walls. The floor began to glow with golden patterns, spreading like veins of light. The holograms of the past merged with the present, human and Velrun figures appearing side by side. Outside, Baron Valkor's ship fired its weapons, beams of red plasma tearing through the sky. But before the blast could hit, a shield of light erupted from the temple, deflecting the attack. On the command deck, Valkor's eyes widened. "Impossible." Back inside, Lyra's voice grew louder. Her body shook, tears running down her cheeks. The crystals around her floated higher, spinning in rhythm with her words. Elior reached out, holding her steady. "You're not alone," he said. Her voice changed, now mixed with his heartbeat, their bond glowing bright. The temple responded, awakening something vast beneath the earth. When the last word left her lips, silence fell. The light dimmed, then the ancient voice spoke once more. "The bond is whole again." Lyra collapsed into Elior's arms, exhausted but alive. He held her close as the blue glow faded to soft silver. Outside, the storm broke. The wild zone was calm again. Elior looked at the temple walls. "You did it," he whispered. "You woke the voice of the ancients." Lyra's eyes opened weakly. "No," she said softly. "We did." But above them in the sky, Baron Valkor's ship turned back, not defeated but furious. He looked down at the glowing temple, his face hard as steel. "She thinks she's found her voice," he muttered. "Then I'll silence it forever." Lightning flashed behind his ship as it descended. The next battle would decide the fate of two worlds. The sky above the wild zone burned red. Baron Valkor's warship floated like a dark god over the glowing temple, its shadow swallowing the valley below. The air trembled with the hum of plasma cannons charging for battle. Elior stood at the temple's edge, watching the massive ship descend. His jaw tightened. "He's coming himself." Lyra stood beside him, her face pale but calm. The silver mark on her wrist flickered weakly. She was tired. The song she had sung to awaken the temple had drained her completely. Yet in her eyes burned a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. "He won't stop," she said softly. "He'd rather destroy this planet than let me speak again." Elior turned to her. "Then we don't run. We stand." Before she could answer, a blast of red light struck the ground near them, sending waves of dust and energy into the air. When it cleared, Baron Valkor himself stood at the base of the temple. Tall, armored and furious, behind him a squad of elite soldiers surrounded the area, weapons aimed at the two fugitives. Valkor's voice boomed through the air. "Daughter." Lyra flinched, the word sounding more like an insult than love. "I gave you every luxury," he said coldly, walking closer. "And you repay me with shame by running away with this."
"Human filth?"
Elior stepped forward. "She ran because she found the truth you buried." Valkor's golden eyes turned to him, filled with disgust. "Silence, creature. You have no place speaking in the presence of your betters." Elior met his gaze without fear. "Your kind keeps calling itself better, but I've seen more courage in your daughter's silence than in your empire's whole army." The Baron raised his weapon, a long blade made of living plasma. "Enough." Lyra stepped between them, spreading her arms. "Stop," she cried, her voice echoing through the valley. The mark on her wrist flared brightly, sending ripples of light through the air. Valkor hesitated for a moment, the sound of her voice still strange to him. Then his anger returned, colder and deeper. "So it's true," he said. "You can speak. The curse is broken." Lyra looked at him, her voice trembling but steady. "It was never a curse. You made it one because you feared what it meant." He laughed bitterly. "Power belongs to the strong, not to weak things that hide behind feelings." Elior clenched his fists. Then maybe that's why your world is dying. The Baron moved faster than sight. His blade slashed across the space between them. Elior blocked with a metal rod, sparks flying. The impact threw him to the ground. Elior! Lyra screamed, rushing to him. Valcor stood over them, his shadow falling across her. You've forgotten your place, daughter. He lifted the blade high. Let me remind you, something in Lyra broke. The fear in her eyes turned into fury. Her mark blazed like a small sun. Don't touch him, she cried. The sound of her voice struck like thunder. The ground split open beneath the Baron's feet. The air exploded in waves of light. The soldiers screamed as their weapons shorted out, armor sparking and melting. The Baron staggered backward, shielding his eyes. What are you doing? Lyra floated above the ground now, her silver hair rising like smoke, her eyes glowing pure white. The temple behind her answered, its symbols burning gold. Elior, half-conscious, reached out weakly. Lyra, stop. You'll burn yourself out. Tears streamed down her face. He was going to kill you. The Baron roared, trying to push against the force. You dare use your voice against your blood? Lyra's voice softened, sad, almost gentle. You stopped being my father the moment you gave me away. The words hit him harder than any weapon. The energy around her reached its peak, light so bright it swallowed the entire valley. When it faded, silence fell. The soldiers were unconscious, their armor shattered. The temple's glow dimmed to calm blue. The Baron lay on the ground, his weapon broken, his pride torn apart. Lyra landed slowly, her strength fading. She fell beside Elior and touched his face. He was still breathing, but weak. The blast had struck him too. No, she whispered, panic rising. Please don't leave me. Her tears fell onto his chest, glowing as they touched his skin. The mark on her wrist pulsed once more, brighter than ever. Please, she sobbed, come back. The temple answered her. A faint hum filled the air and a sound like a heartbeat. Light spread from her hands into Elior's body. His wounds began to heal, the color returning to his face. He opened his eyes slowly, whispering, You called me back. Lyra smiled weakly through her tears. I told you. I would never let him silence me again. Above them, the sky began to shift. The clouds turned silver and a distant beacon of light rose from the temple's core, shooting straight into the stars. Valcor groaned, watching through half-blind eyes. What have you done? Lyra looked up at the shining beam. Her voice was calm now, but filled with quiet power. I spoke, she said, and the stars listened. As the beam reached higher, it sent a wave of energy across the sky, a message to every human in Velrun world alike. The age of silence was over. Lyra turned back to Elior, her voice soft. It's beginning, he nodded faintly. Then let's finish it together. And in the ruins of the old world, the daughter who could not speak became the voice that would change the galaxy. The world was quiet after the storm. The wild zone lay in ruins, smoke drifting above shattered crystals, ancient machines lying still again after their awakening. The great temple stood cracked but glowing, its heart pulsing with silver light. The beacon that Lyra had unleashed still reached into the heavens, a column of energy that pierced the stars themselves. At the temple's base, Lyra sat beside Elior, holding his hand. He was alive but weak. The air was heavy with calm, the kind that comes after great chaos. She looked at the horizon where her father's warship hovered, silent and broken. Half of its hull was scorched from her outburst. The once proud soldiers of the Velrun now lay scattered, their weapons useless, their pride crushed. Elior stirred, his voice faint but warm. You did it. You stopped him? Lyra shook her head slowly. No, she whispered. I only began something I don't understand. He tried to sit up and she helped him. Together, they looked up at the silver beam stretching into space. It shimmered, sending ripples through the clouds like sound waves through water. What is it doing? He asked. Lyra closed her eyes. It's speaking, she said softly. Calling out to the stars. The temple responded to her words. The floor beneath them glowed again, showing ancient symbols moving like living script. A deep, melodic hum filled the air, the same voice that had spoken to them in the ancient halls before. The bond is complete. Elior looked around, searching for the source, though he knew there wasn't one. The temple itself was alive, the voice has awakened. The message travels. Lyra felt the vibrations through her chest like a song rising from her heart. It's sending our words across every world, she whispered. Human. Velron. All will hear it. Elior smiled weakly. Then you're not just speaking anymore. You're teaching them to listen. She smiled too, tears glimmering in her silver eyes. But their moment of peace broke when heavy footsteps echoed through the rubble, the sound of metal scraping against stone. Baron Valcor was still alive. His armor was shattered, one eye glowing faintly. His face was twisted, not with rage this time, but with something close to sorrow. He looked at his daughter. Lyra, his voice cracked. You don't understand what you've done. The council will see this as treason. You've doomed our people. Lyra rose slowly, standing tall despite her trembling legs. No, father, she said gently. I've saved them from their pride. He took a step forward, his hand shaking as he reached for her. You spoke like a god. The others will fear you. I don't want to be feared, she said softly. I want to be heard. Valcor stopped. The light from the beacon reflected in his eyes. For the first time he looked small, like a man lost in the very world he built. Your mother once said the same, he murmured. And I silenced her too. Lyra's expression softened. Then listen now before it's too late. She walked closer and took his hand, the same hand that once struck fear into empires. It's not weakness to listen. It's strength. The Baron stared at her, his lips trembling. Then slowly he sank to one knee before her. The mighty ruler of the southern stars knelt in silence. From above, the clouds parted and beams of silver light fell upon the valley. Across the skies of distant worlds, both human and Velron alike saw the same vision. A girl standing before her father, light shining from her voice. Across the stars, ships paused mid-flight. Workers looked up from their cities. Soldiers lowered their weapons. The same voice echoed everywhere, calm, clear, and filled with truth. Once you called each other enemies. You built walls of pride and fear. But now the stars will hear a new song, not of war, but of understanding. Her words were soft, yet they carried through every frequency, every translation, every heart. Elior watched her in awe. The girl who once could not speak was now speaking for billions. The temple flared one last time, brighter than ever. The beacon dissolved into thousands of shining fragments that drifted upward, scattering like glowing petals into the galaxy. As the last of the light faded, Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted. Elior rushed to her side and caught her before she could fall. You did it, he whispered, his voice breaking. You changed everything. Lyra smiled faintly, her eyes half closed. I only spoke what was already inside all of us. She rested her head on his shoulder. Above them, the sky was clear now, endless, full of quiet stars listening to her final echo. Baron Valcor stepped forward, his voice low. What happens now? Elior looked up at him. Now, your people and mine decide whether to follow her words or return to silence. Valcor looked at his daughter, no longer as a curse, but as a miracle. She spoke, he whispered. And I finally heard. Lyra opened her eyes one last time and gazed at the heavens. Do you hear them? She asked softly. Elior listened. In the wind, faint voices whispered, human and Velron together, repeating her words across the stars. I hear them, he said. Lyra smiled, her voice now a soft whisper carried by the wind. Then the silence is broken. The light around them dimmed, and the night returned. But the galaxy had changed forever. From that day on, the story spread from world to world, of a human slave and a mute alien princess who taught two civilizations how to listen. And the legend said that when she spoke, the stars themselves paused, because even the universe wanted to hear her voice.